All right. So, hello everyone, and welcome to Castalho Podcast, episode 131. I am Eliezer Rezende, talking from Pouso Alegre, Minas Gerais.
Hi, and I am Bruno Rocha speaking from Guarulhos, São Paulo.
So, our guest for today's episode is a new Vim maintainer, Vim contributor, and a software engineer. And it is with a great pleasure that we welcome Justin Keys to our podcast. So, Justin, please say hi to our listeners.
Hi. Good to be here.
Nice. That's very nice to have you here. And we have a lot of questions today. So to get started, we want to know how and when you started as a developer. How did your career started?
Well, I started around 2000, accidentally, I guess. And I was working with Plone, if anyone has ever heard of that. It was an old, I think it's still around. It's a web framework based on something called Zope. And it was written in Python. It was pretty advanced for its time. And that was my first foray into programming. It was probably really actually too complex of a system to start with, which tends to be a theme in what I do. I don't take baby steps. I sort of bite off more than I can chew often. And I was sort of on the Microsoft stack for a long time professionally, for probably about 10 years after that. But always at home, I had started running Linux since 2000, so I was always tinkering with that and just doing sort of like sysadmin activities, and occasionally would use Vim. And in college, I would use Vim on projects just because on a laptop, it was the least annoying thing to use for C projects for school. But I didn't really start using it seriously until about maybe 6 years ago. Yeah.
All right. So just to mention, here at Castalho Podcast, we talk a lot about Python because this is the language that we use most, and we really love the community. So it is great to hear that you started doing some Python code. So, and nowadays, what kind of software you do as a software engineer? Do you stay doing Python?
Well, I'm a bit of a dilettante. Besides running every operating system, I also tend to not really stick with any particular software stack. But professionally right now, I'm using Python, a lot of shell scripting, and a good amount of Java too. But like I said before that, I was doing a lot on the Microsoft stack. And obviously for NeoVim, I'm writing a lot of C and Lua.
That's nice. Yeah, I love Lua language. And actually, there are some questions here about Lua for later. But for now, I want to know, how did you get involved with Vim and the Vim community?
So I've always kind of wanted to tell this story, and I haven't really ever told it, or at least it's been, in my head, because it was actually kind of accidental. I mean, like I said, I had been flirting with Vim off and on for a long time, using it sort of just like, as I would say, probably 80% of Vim's users use it, which is like incidentally, casually, for quick edits. But it never really is like something they stick with. They go back to their comfort zone after they're done with their sysadmin task or something like that. Professionally, I was using Visual Studio, and I was really comfortable in that. And I still, to this day, think it's a very good environment, and there's a lot to learn from that, a lot to take away. And I credit it with, some of, just accelerating my learning of software in general, especially early on in my career. But it's, somehow or other, the banal editing tasks still occupy a very large chunk of a developer's time, even if they're in a Microsoft shop where everything's supposed to be integrated from the product level all the way down to the development level. Still, you end up editing files that aren't supported by Visual Studio, or like build files or shell scripts. All those things, despite the best efforts of well-paid and very smart people who have been trying to eliminate that from people's lives forever. And no one, and I can tell you right now that in most Microsoft shops, at least the shops that I was in, no one wants to be dealing with that stuff. They don't seek it out. It's an accident, but it still comes up. You're always opening a text editor, or you're using your IDE as a text editor because there's no intelligence for all these different types of file formats, low-level editing tasks. So my point is, and even in an IDE, there are editing tasks which are just really laborious and tedious. And I got really tired of this. I had been developing for 10 years software for 10 years at that point. And just using like control arrow keys to move around and things like that, I finally just got really fed up with it gradually. And so I was looking for a good text editor that I could just adopt and master for quite some time. And so, for a while, I was really trying to make Notepad++ work for me. I was really trying to make it work. And there were just some things that were really painful about it. But that's the first thing you reach for if you're looking for something open source and you're a Windows developer. I gave up on that. And then finally, around 2012, Sublime Text was had quite a bit of street cred at that point, and I was and I liked it, and it seemed like it had a lot of momentum, which is really important in any stack that you're in, any tool that you're looking at, is momentum. And I was about to purchase it, and then I thought to myself, well, before I purchase this, I should probably make a donation to Vim, because I still have gotten a lot out of it. So I gave, I donated $50 to Vim at that time, and so I was starting to. So I spent a few days trying to make Sublime work for me, and it was missing some things. And so I was installing a plugin here, a plugin there. Like, oh, it doesn't do this. Go get this plugin. Oh yeah, of course. But then I was thinking, well, if I'm going to do this for Sublime, installing plugins to make it work for me, then I should also try to do that for Vim. And that's when I discovered things like Control P and a couple other plugins that at the time took that edge off of some friction that I think new users encounter when they're trying to wrap their head around Vim, and also having that envy of seeing people do the Control P thing in Sublime. There's definitely, that's an effective workflow. So Control P plugin in Vim bridged that gap enough. And at that point, I was like, yeah, I can make this work. And I ran with it. And I've been obsessed with it pretty much since then. It's, yeah.
Cool. Is that the right time to start a flame war yet? Have you ever tried Emacs?
Oh yeah, I have. I gave Emacs a try for the better part of a year. I think around 2013, 2014. And I love Emacs. I think that there's a lot to learn from it too. And there are some things that I have brought from Emacs, somewhat just like superficial, but also just philosophical. I try to bring those things into workflows, plugins, or NeoVim itself whenever I can. Yeah, but I ended up not sticking with it because
you have only 10 fingers. It's difficult to play it with only 10 fingers. That's the problem.
Well, I was using Evo Mode, and Evo Mode is a fine piece of software, and I think it's a triumph. And the fact that it's really not much code either is pretty interesting, but it still had some limitations around bindings that I couldn't get past even after having a good discussion with the maintainer of Evo Mode. He said, yeah, this is just a limitation that you can't get around. And also I just found myself, it's the same old story that you'll hear from people who have done this. The ecosystem isn't really designed around Evo Mode. It's sort of a second-class citizen. And I found myself just doing a lot of work to get the things that I liked from Vim into Emacs. And I started to sort of become convinced of the fact that even though Emacs is definitely more flexible and more elegant than Vim, there's still just like a constant factor that you can get of work that's already been done in the Vim development model, for better or worse, that you don't have the man hours to reinvent that in Emacs, and no one else in Emacs seems to want a lot of these things either. You know, things like a universal quick fix list, or Vim completion model is very different than any other editor or IDE out there, but it has advantages, and no one's going to ever re-implement that in any other editor, I can tell you right now. And also, I like Vim regular expressions, even though it's annoying having to learn more than one dialect. It has advantages and not to mention X commands, and I could go on and on and on. And so NeoVim would be a way to address that at least the X commands complaint by embedding it in Emacs. Yeah.
All right. So I want to say I really love Vim. I tried Emacs as well, but I cannot deal with the keyboard shortcuts. So and also I've been told a lot about, hey, Emacs has async tasks and this and that. So with that in mind, so async tasks and async processes and being able to run async processes, I want to get us to the next subject, which is our main focus here for this episode, which is NeoVim. So yeah, can you tell us how, when, and why NeoVim was created? So we know that it was started, I mean, it is a fork from Vim, and it was, as I know, you can correct me if I am wrong. So it was started by a Brazilian, and I think he's now stepped a little bit from the project, and you are the main maintainer. So could you tell us about the history of NeoVim, why it was needed, and why it was created, and when it was done?
Sure. Those are a lot of questions, but as far as why it was created, I think like most things in the universe, there isn't really that good of a reason. There's a couple controversial reasons that people ascribe to it, and it's true. You know, I was following the Vim development mailing list very closely by that time for several years, and but I was also in contact with Tiago de Arruda, the Brazilian that you mentioned, when he first started sort of toying around with his fork of Vim, and I was very excited about it, just because I had been following the Vim development mailing list closely, and it seemed like the pace was, you know, frustratingly slow. And if you look at the contribution graph on GitHub, you can sort of just convince yourself that, yeah, things were slow for most of Vim's life up until about I would say 2015. And so that was sort of the environment that this happened in. It was like it was just sort of like business as usual, and nothing really was happening. The last major release of Vim, it was its flagship feature was a new regular expression engine, which to this day no one really cares about. I mean, it's true that it does make, you know, some types of expressions faster, but users don't care about it. Really, they don't. Like, no one ever cites that as the thing that they were excited about in Vim 7.4. So it was just sort of an environment of what felt like at the time complacency. And so if you read the announcement on Hacker News at the time, I mean, people were extremely excited, and this was a big relief. And so people forget that when they're comparing the state of things today, where they see that Vim has again had a resurgence of development itself, and they're saying, oh yeah, well, okay, so, you know, what's the problem? Well, the problem was anyone who's asking that probably just either forgot or wasn't paying attention up to 2015. The Vim started as just this toy project of Tiago's that he and this other guy were just sort of experimenting with. And then Tiago is a person who, to me, seems like very self-assured, and he has very strong visions and of like what he wants to do and how he wants to do it, and a lot of confidence that he can do it. And so, you know, probably very few other people would have had the drive to decide that they're just going to announce a fork and try to get funding for it and actually do it. I certainly wouldn't have. But I'm glad that he did do it, because it wouldn't have happened otherwise. And what were your other questions?
Yeah, so I think you have answered most of them. So I've asked how, when, and why. So I mean, I just want to draw a picture about it, and I think you did that. So yeah, I've read about that a little bit. I mean, I can say maybe 2 months ago. So I was looking more about NeoVim, because I saw that there were some specific plugins that just work on NeoVim. And so I want to take a look and say why they are just supporting NeoVim, since now Vim has async tests and things like that. So yeah, I know that NeoVim had offered that for a long time, more than Vim itself, and it seems that now only some plugins are migrating and supporting both. So yeah, I mean, It was great. By the way, I've been using NeoVim on day-to-day work for maybe a month and a half from now. So I did the change. So yeah, I will save that for later, and we'll let Bruno ask the other question.
Okay, yeah. The next question is to continue what you were talking about the Brazilian guy who is the founder of the project. Is Thiago still active on the development, or I assume that you are the lead developer now, the lead maintainer?
I'm the lead maintainer, that for sure. And all that means is that I do the boring work. I'm certainly not. I wouldn't call myself the lead developer. There are, much better developers working on it than I. I do what I can to fix, bugs and add features that I care about. But I wouldn't say there's several people that are just sort of leading design and development and in the areas, subsystems that they sort of have adopted. Which is great, because that's sort of, it's a degraded form of the Linux model where, you have people who just sort of know their own subsystems. I try as much as possible to know as much parts of the system as I can, but it's going to take a long time to get to a mastery of the whole system. And so it's not like no one is really siloed, but people have their favorite parts that they work on and that they are comfortable with. As far as Thiago goes, I talked to him about a year ago, and he said that he was planning to start working on the project again, but he hasn't done so. And occasionally we have discussions about some design decisions or technical questions that he still helps with, and he still owns the website domain name, and he is available whenever we need him. But yeah, he's not actively working on the project right now, and I don't know the reasons for that, except I probably couldn't blame him if it was just because he had better things to do with his life. It's hard work, and it's not always fun.
I can imagine. So what are the key differences between Vim and NeoVim? And I saw a couple related to community, as you mentioned, how the development process works, the code base itself. So I will let you tell us a little bit more about some of the points that you think they differ. And we know that NeoVim supports most of, or if not all, features that Vim currently supports, right?
That's the goal. And if you run the tip of Vim, then obviously there's going to be patches that we haven't caught up to. But we are constantly tracking that and merging back features that are relevant and bug fixes. So within that margin of error, yes, we NeoVim is a superset of Vim. Things have gotten a little bit more complicated for the user who is trying to compare the projects now that NeoVim has its own flavor of job control, which is superficially different, but not meaningfully different. Sorry, Vim has its own flavor of job control. Vim has its own flavor of the terminal, which is also superficially different, but not meaningfully different. So the conversation has gotten more noisy there, less clear cut, but NeoVim still has a bunch of minor and medium-sized features that Vim definitely doesn't have, and it also has some very major features that Vim doesn't have, such as the API. It's a very powerful API that is easy to hook into from external clients using any software stack. Like there's a Haskell client, there's an Erlang client, Elixir, you name it, Clojure, JavaScript. JavaScript client is being used to implement one of the best, most mature, most impressive Vim UIs out there, which is OniVim. I'm really impressed by that project. They've come a long way, and it seems to have a lot of momentum and excitement behind it. And I'm actually excited about it. I haven't been particularly stumping for any one UI here or there, because I think they all have merits, and but they also have different pros and cons. So the benefits are sort of becoming a little bit more abstract now, like or maybe a little bit more indirect. So there's no longer like this killer marketing feature that people can say, oh yeah, NeoVim is so much better because it has job control or it has a terminal. No, Vim now checks off both of those checkboxes. So this is kind of like in politics. It's called co-opting the message. NeoVim's message was, job control and terminal. Those are two things you can say in like one breath. And now Vim co-opted that message. But if you look at the feature list, which is in the NeoVim help document, there's a ton of other features there that I think are cool. But it's hard to just verbalize, in an elevator pitch, one particular killer feature. Although there is a very exciting feature coming up. Well, there's a couple of very exciting things coming up. One is extended marks. Another is multi-cursor. Another is multi-grid, which Bjorn Lins is working on, and floating windows. But as far as like convincing people to use NeoVim, I don't really care to ever try to convince anyone to use it. I always like to just take the approach of if people don't want to use it on their own, why is that? I try to ask why that is, and what can be better about it. And if you're fine with Vim, there's really no reason to use NeoVim. Like it sounds kind of philosophical, but it's really hard to make the case that you should use something else if you're happy with what you have.
So can you tell us a little bit more about, how Vim and NeoVim are developed? How both projects accepts contribution? I can tell I was able to find a typo on Vim 8 release notes, and then I saw my first opportunity to contribute to the project, and then I submitted a pull request, but I wasn't happy because my name wasn't on the contributors list. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, even with NeoVim, you probably won't get on the contributors list just for a typo. because we don't want, you know, just minor typos to be in the Git logs, because then the Git logs would be too long. But the development model is more spread out. I hope that we can continue to spread it out even more. Like, I still think that I'm too much of a bottleneck. But there's definitely fewer points of failure than with Vim, but that's kind of just, you know, not setting the bar high enough. So Vim's development model is you send patches, and Bram will merge them locally, and then he runs some personal script that no one has ever seen, which then creates a commit message. But he doesn't really care about, how can I word this? He's not really interested in like the minutia of like VCSs. Like even when he was using Mercurial, he didn't really, he just uses like commit. That's it. That's the only command he used, I guess. And maybe branch, I don't know. But so the script that he has that makes a commit in Git, it does not change the Git listed author. Since you mentioned having your name in the credits. But so that's why every commit looks like it's authored by him, although your name will be mentioned in the commit message. So for NeoVim, you send a pull request. Hopefully it gets reviewed by interested parties. If it's a subsystem that someone is really familiar with, they'll review it and they can merge it. There's 18 people in NeoVim that have permissions to commit directly to the master branch and to merge PRs and to reject PRs. But I still would like it to be more spread out, and the only way we can really do that is to somehow make it easier for people to get involved in the project and then keep them around. Yeah, but it's hard because I'm gonna blame it a little bit on C. I think that C just scares people away, and there's just fewer developers out there willing to deal with it.
Yeah, so he write it in Rust. Yeah, that's the new hype. Put the whole thing in a new Rust fork, and you have it solved. Yeah.
I hope someone does, but it's not going to be me.
Actually, Google is reading a new code editor, which is called ZXI. Yeah, I haven't seen it working yet because it's an API based editor, but looks promising. Yeah, and it's written in Rust. Yeah, I heard.
Yes, it is, and it sort of follows a similar server client or peer-to-peer architecture that NeoVim has. And in a Google talk, which is on YouTube, the author Ralph Levine mentioned NeoVim as being an influence in that architecture.
Cool. Nice. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a cool project. I guess we'll have to wait and see. It's very heavily tied to the CRDT concept, which I guess, you know, I haven't looked very closely at it, but I wonder if that will be a barrier to people developing against that level of the system, because that requires finesse and yeah, and plus I'm just not really convinced that level of hyper performance is required, such that it requires, you know, such a sophisticated architecture. I think you can get really good performance without that architecture probably. But he also seems to have aspirations for really efficient, like over the network scenarios.
Yeah. Also, back to the NeoVim and the reasons to use it. I heard that you can use Lua language to
Yes.
script NeoVim, and some people said that maybe new plugins is going to be replacing the Vim.init to the Lua.init, and everything it will be very easier to write and maintain, because sometimes Vim script is very hard to maintain. So do you think that's the plan? The plan is to have everything scripted in Lua, and maybe it's a good reason to use it. Yeah.
I do think that's a killer feature. I'm really excited about that feature. And it is implemented and it's ready to use today. But it's also kind of it's not like a big bang feature that is like delivered to users, and it's going to take several years to ramp up sort of the ecosystem so that, you know, there's like mature tooling around it. But it's already really exciting because just on a most basic level, for example, Lua is parsable. VimScript is not. Well, that's not quite true, but VimScript is really hard to parse. And so just the fact that there's already all that tooling out there for Lua, that means that we can do linting. We could have that built in, you know, for users who are using Lua to write their configurations and things like that. And some other nice things. So yeah, I'm planning to personally also implement the support for having your configuration file completely in Lua, which is just, you know, just a matter of like looking for that file instead of the VimScript file. It's not really that much work. But as far as being more maintainable, like, you're not going to be able to avoid all VimScript, because VimScript, you know, the most basic elements of it are just, it's like a DSL, it's commands. So there'd be no reason to like pretend that those commands don't exist and then re-implement them all in Lua. That would not make any sense. So you would still end up calling commands from Lua, but there's certain things that can be improved a lot, like some of the accidental complexity of VimScript, such as weird errors if you miss like a control structure, or having to do string manipulation everywhere. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I would prefer to write in Lua, because I tried VimScript, I think twice, and not a good experience. Also, I want to recommend for our listeners who are trying to configure the new Vim. Our friend from Brazil, Avelino, created a site which is very useful, which is vim-bootstrap.com. Have you heard about it? Vim Bootstrap?
I think I have seen that posted, yes.
Yeah. So Vim Bootstrap is a site where you choose which programming languages do you program, and then it generates a configuration file for new Vim and also for Vim. And then okay. I don't know exactly, it puts all the plugins in a bundle installation. And then when you run for the first time, you get all the plugins installed automatically. So it's a very nice project, and it works good because I did it today. Yeah.
Okay.
Just before we started, I configured the new Vim for Rust, for Lua, for Python, and work it good. So
I hope they add support for generating a Lua configuration file. That would make it really easy for people to get started with that.
Yeah,
instead of just having to do it all yourself.
The website is actually a GitHub repository, so everything is on a GitHub repository. So it's just a matter of sending a pull request with the Lua config there. That will be fantastic. I'll put the link here on the chat for people on YouTube, and we put the link on the show notes for people listening after.
Okay.
Nice.
All right, so we talked about the current state of the project, and I would like to know what are the future plans for the project. You mentioned about extended marks, multi-cursor, multi-grid, and floating windows, and I think that is for OmniVim UI. So I didn't get that correctly. So is that for OmniVim, or is that something that will be supported on NeoVim?
All of those things will be supported in the terminal UI. Floating windows in particular is being designed with, to have core support so that it just works and without any help from an external UI. And all the other things too as well. So those are the short-term plans that I would say, 95% of the work is done for those specific milestones. Other future plans, and those are short-term plans. And if you go to the website neovim.io, there's a roadmap on there that lists a more detailed outline, and it also mentions long-term plans. So the long-term plans are to continue making it easier and easier and easier for NeoVim to be embedded in more and more places. This is actually sort of a goal that Vim made for itself a long time ago, but the way to do that never really became clear. That there was a bunch of different attempts, like the client server feature, the NetBeans API, and various integrations like cscope integration, and I think there was something else, but and then now the JSON support in it, I guess, could be said to be something that works towards that goal of embedding them. But we want to keep making it easier and easier. And so far, historically, empirically, there's quite a bit of evidence that this work to make things easy to do is working. It's having good results. The fact that there are 20 different UIs implemented for NeoVim in the last 4 years, that's probably more than the number of UIs that was built for Vim in 20 years, I think, maybe. And many of them are successful, and it requires lower effort. And there's about 20 different clients also for the API. So other long-term plans are, I would say the smart grid is a long-term plan. I said that was a short-term plan, but it's not. And the other long-term plan is to expose the syntax groupings as an API. That means being for plugins and clients to be able to query it, but also to define syntax groups and text attributes. And that's a big deal because it means that it will be much easier, and it'll be much easier to parse languages outside of NeoVim, but still have syntax highlighting and semantic grouping annotations in a performant way. They'll be able to be communicated to in NeoVim Core.
Cool. Yeah, nice. Yeah, we have some questions here from the chat. Yeah, Jaisler is asking for a person who is starting to learn how to use Vim and its commands. Is there any advantage of using NeoVim, or is that the same thing, or do you recommend using the pure Vim? What do you think about it?
Well, I will say without hesitation that there's no disadvantage. So if I were learning them, yeah, I definitely would. There would be no reason not to start with NeoVim. For the same reason that you wouldn't, reach for like an old version of Vim. If you're going to start learning Vim, you're probably going to start with the latest version. And if you run into a feature that doesn't exist on an older version and you like that feature, I mean, you haven't been harmed by the lack of that feature in an older version. So, there are going to be some things that are nicer in NeoVim, but if you get used to them, you might miss them if you go to use Vim. But it's not going to handicap or prevent you from using Vim effectively. I hop on, servers that only have Vim all the time, and I am able to use it just fine.
Great. So since we are talking about learning, I think this is a good moment. Do you have any recommendation of books, articles, websites that someone willing to learn Vim would take a look and learn more about how to use, how to get more effective using Vim? So I don't know. Do you have something to share with us?
Yes. Well, besides, if you're really a true beginner, and you don't want to just read random blog posts and hack your way through stuff, which is what I did, you should just do the tutorial first of all. In NeoVim, it's a command. The name of the command is literally tutorial. That will start the tutorial. It takes like 30 minutes. Do that, and you'll have enough understanding of how Vim works to start using it without running into work stopping problems. But then probably the next step after that, if you still are looking for like a book, you should read Drew Neal's books, Practical Vim and Modern Vim. And then if you want to learn to write plugins, you should read Steve Losh's book, Learn Vim the Hard Way. That was what I read when I first started writing plugins. And it's still the best thing out there for that use case.
I think worth mentioning about Drew Neal's Vimcast.org. So if you are looking for something in a screencast way, you can check that out. And yeah, Drew Neal, I think those are those are excellent books about Vim. And by the way, I happen to be a technical reviewer for Practical Vim. So I have a hard copy here, and I see my name in there because when Drew was writing that book, I reached him out via email. So I told I was eager to read the book, and he sent me some 2 chapters, and I provide some feedback, and I happen to have my name in the book. So I'm really proud of having my name in there. And yeah, so I just bought the Modern Vim one. I think I am around 7% on reading it. So I'm using Kindle to do that, and it says me that I am around that mark. So yeah, those are good suggestions about how to learn more about Vim.
Good. Yeah, I would like to ask you another thing, which is as we are talked about a lot about plugins, do you have any plugin that you recommend for people beginning to install it, which is a good one? Plugins
Oh,
that
okay.
you cannot live without it.
It would not. It is not going to hurt. I don't know if a beginner will need it that much, but Tim Pope's unimpaired plugin is essential. I think definitely everyone should have it. There's no reason not to have it. And in particular, it will reduce a lot of, it will remove the friction from using the quick fix list, which is really important and central to using Vim effectively. Yeah. For a beginner, I don't know any particular plugin that a beginner would really need, though, to tell you the truth. If you start out with NeoVim. If you start out with Vim, then as a beginner, you need to make sure that you are using defaults.vim in Vim 8, or in Vim 7.4, you should be using sensible.vim.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, when I use Emacs most of time when I'm on the console, and then I use Visual Studio Code when I'm on the graphical interface.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember some years ago when I had Vim as my main editor, I missed a lot the directory navigation stuff, and I tried some plugins like Nerdtree and others, and that thing doesn't work well for me. Is that built-in on New Vim? You have this feature built-in, or you have to install some plugin to have that directory navigations and history and stuff like this?
Well, there's a plugin called NetRW, which is shipped with Vim and NeoVim. I also wrote my own plugin called Dervish, which is a directory viewer, because I couldn't stand NetRW any longer.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy with that.
Cool.
And yeah.
Yeah, what I miss so much is stuff like fuzzy search for directory names, and putting partial matching for directories when I don't remember the complete path and those stuff.
So I've thought a lot about that, and every time I think about it, it takes so long to think of all the scenarios that would need to be addressed that I just put it aside again, because it just means it's not time yet to include a fuzzy finder. There's too many questions to be answered. There's still some fundamental work that needs to be done. And to tell you the truth, I think actually users would be better served if maybe we just established some sort of standard bindings that invoke a fuzzy finder somehow, but also just making it easier to install plugins, would sort of eliminate this question of having to ship with anything. I mean, really, the root problem there is just that there's too much friction to install plugins. So if you solve that, then who cares what you ship with?
Yeah, so you've mentioned about Control P, and for people willing to navigate faster, I mean, finding files into a project faster, it can help. So you press Control P and it will bring a window so you can fuzzy finder files within your project. And I think it is a very good project. Also, I saw that you can integrate that with Silver Searcher and other fuzzy finder tools, which may speed up a little bit, because I think Control P is implemented pretty much in VimScript, if I'm not wrong. But anyway, this is a kind of advanced topic. And since we are approaching 1 hour, or of recording here, I would like to move to the top 5 because here at Castalho Podcast, we not only like to know more about technology, but also about people. And to learn a little bit more about you, Justin, we'd like to ask you, what music recommendations do you have for us?
Music. Okay. I thought you were going to ask about movies. I'm prepared with movies, but not so much with music. See, I used to listen to a lot of heavy metal, like Lamb of God, Megadeth, Arch Enemy. I sort of stopped kind of listening to music though, which makes me sound like a sad person. But so if I had to list, I think at least one band that I still really like, which isn't heavy metal at all, is Arcade Fire. They're really good, yeah. And I like them because they're kind of bombastic and emotional, but also catchy. Yeah. Other than that, I had a hard time coming up with music really that I'm into these days, just because it's not really a part of my life these days for some reason. Okay, which says a lot about me. So in a way, it is a good question.
Yeah, that's a very nice list. I love Arch Enemy. Is one of my favorite bands with the old vocalist Angela. Yeah, love that band. It's a good band. So, and now
I'm planning to see Iron Maiden in a few months too, as well.
Oh, nice. That's cool. Yeah, I saw Iron Maiden, I think 3 times. Yeah, on live. Great. Yeah, good. Yeah, what about books? Books, magazines, something you like to read? Can you recommend something technical or not technical? What do you read?
Okay. I read a lot of Hacker News, way too much. Book that always stuck with me was 1984, and I also read quite late in my life The Godfather, and I ended up liking it probably 100 times more than I expected to.
Better than the movie?
I liked the movie a lot better after I saw The Godfather, or after I read the book. The movie was much more interesting to me after I read the book. Yeah. I'm very interested in informal power structures, and well, actually, I guess just any power structure. But I think the mob is that you can draw from that how human systems organize themselves, but there's also some interesting psychological stuff in there. I don't know if it's pop psychology or what, but Mario Puzo had me convinced.
All right, so
those are the only books that came to mind for me.
Those are good suggestions. So we saved the section we were waiting for last. So tell us about movies or series, whatever you like to watch.
Okay. I think Blade Runner and Apocalypse Now are definitely high on my list of favorite movies, and maybe Total Recall as well. I'm kind of a morbid person, I guess.
Yeah, that's all good movies. So you like the 2 versions of Blade Runner?
No, the second one was garbage.
Yeah, I know that.
I have a lot to say about that, actually. I'm so glad you asked. I was waiting for. I was looking for random people on the street where I could just like shake them and tell them how much Blade Runner 2017 sucked.
Yeah,
it was literally the same movie, and just like they came up with like some story that basically it was the same pacing, the same tropes, the same arc, the same settings, like locations.
Yeah, I felt the same with the newer Mad Max, because I hated that movie.
Oh, really?
People was saying that it was awesome because of the special effects and stuff like this, but for me, it's not like the old Mad Max. Yeah. So I kept saying, no, how can you like this?
I only saw the very, very first Mad Max, and that was kind of like a weird, like, half-finished movie or something. But
yeah, it's the 80s. The 80s are very weird movies, but yeah. Nice. So thank you for the recommendations, and we would like to thank you, Justin, for taking some time to talk with us about NeoVim, and we hope we can talk later in the future about the new the news on the project. And it was an honor to have you here on Castalho Podcast. And now I will leave some time for you to leave a message for our listeners, make your advertisements, sell something, do whatever you want.
Okay. Well, thank you both for having me. I enjoyed it. I'm always happy to talk about NeoVim and give my opinions on anything else to anyone who will suffer them. And as far as the advertisement goes, we're always looking for more developers on NeoVim, and please check it out, because we've done a ton of work to make it easy to build, easy to get started, and yep, that's it.
All right, so I'd like to thank everyone that have joined us live here. So the questions we have here on the chat, and there are some people interested on learning more about Vim, maybe NeoVim. So we recommend you to go straight to NeoVim because it offers a lot of good stuff. Also, please don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook. Also, if you want to follow the future recordings, make sure that you are subscribed to our YouTube channel, and make sure that you have the notifications enabled so you can know whenever we live recording. Also worth mentioning to our English speakers, folks, that Castalho Podcast is pretty much a Portuguese podcast, but sometimes we would like to have more people here, and that's why we bring some English episodes. We have a tag that lists all the episodes we have in English, so we are going to leave that on our show notes. So go to our website, castalho.info, and check it out. So again, thank you very much, Justin, for joining us here. It was a pleasure and an honor to have you here with us. Also, thank you very much to be late. So we are recording this earlier than we used to, and that's because you are on Germany. So thank you very much for being late with us, and was a very good episode. So I think that's all, folks, and we talk more on the next episode.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.